This hour of programming is brought to you by Krista Knowles and Tom Fettig. You can become a sustaining member of WOMR for as little as $15 a month. Welcome to Healing Wisdom, a Thursday morning talk show featuring guests sharing their stories and knowledge. We discuss the healing aspects of the arts, metaphysics, social justice, and adventure through all types of terrain. So join me, Pandora Peoples, here on WOMR 92.1 FM in Provincetown and WFMR 91.3 FM in Orleans. We're streaming worldwide at WOMR.org. Joining us today from the Whale and Dolphin Conservation is Rob Lott. Today we're speaking about captivity of whales and dolphins. Rob has his master's degree in marine mammal science. He's photographed wildlife all over the world, including in Alaska, Antarctica, Australia, Canada, Iceland, New Zealand, Norway, and the Bay of Biscay. His current position includes the anti-captivity campaign and the Orca program. So thank you so much for joining us today, Rob.
It's my pleasure.
How many whales and dolphins are held in captivity today?
That's a great question. And we've been compiling a database over the last several years. And our estimation now is about 3,700 whales and dolphins and porpoises are kept in concrete tanks or sea pens around the globe today.
Can you talk about the effects of captivity on these sentient, far-roaming creatures?
Yeah, absolutely. We just believe that whales and dolphins, they're just too big, too powerful, too smart to ever be confined to a concrete tank. So what has been scientifically proven over the years is that captivity has a serious effect, not just the physical well-being of these individuals, but the mental and emotional states as well. So we find that frustration is a major cause, often causing whales and dolphins to attack each other if they have no escape within the small confines of captivity. And also, the literature has shown that they've attacked their trainers and sometimes members of the public too. They become bored, they develop a psychosis, and just despair. It's an impoverished environment compared to what they're used to in the wild oceans, and quite often they live a shortened life.
Yeah, I've seen some documentaries and it's really stunning how these animals are being treated and the negative deleterious effects of it on their bodies.
In the wild, a flopped over dorsal fin is probably seen in 1% or so of the wild population. But in captivity, 100% of all adult male orcas have this flopped over dorsal fin. And that's probably because, they're living in a very shallow, small environment. In the wild, the dorsal fin, which in a male orca can reach maybe 1.8 meters tall. It's incredibly high. And it's used for almost like a rudder when they swim in very quickly for stabilization. And because they're not allowed or able to do that in a tank, they spend so much of their time just logging at the surface that there's a physiological breakdown in the dorsal fin. And over time, it just flops over.
And how sensitive are whales and dolphins? What is it like for an animal to have echolocation and be surrounded by these cement enclosures? Like, I always wonder if there's kind of like an echo or magnification of the sensation of the vibration coming back to them, where that they wouldn't get that in nature, right? I mean,
Absolutely. These are, primarily acoustic species, and they have echolocation, which they use to find food, and they're used to navigate in the wild, and that's all redundant in a concrete tank. All they hear is the reverberations, as you say, of the echolocation coming back to them. So in many cases, captive whales and dolphins, over time, they just stop echolocating because it's a redundant quality, and it's a really tragic thing to understand, because obviously they get their food given to them. All the decision, all the choice that a wild whale or dolphin gets to make in the wild, sadly, is not available to them in a tank.
The sensitivity of these creatures, how can we even wrap our brains around it?
Exactly. We know how smart they are. We know they have rich dialects, language. They're incredibly, they live in complex family groups in the wild. Generations often staying together their whole lives. Life in an aquarium, sadly, can mean separation from their families and often being kept alone. And as I mentioned earlier, the scale of the problem, over 3,700 whales and dolphins in 348 facilities in 57 countries around the world. And while we are, winning the battle in the Western world, there's effective legislation in place now in Europe and in North America, in Canada, for example. The huge sort of surge in captivity for whales and dolphins we are seeing in Asia, especially in China, over the last 10 years or so.
Is there any evidence that suggests that man-made sounds or disturbances like turbines or fracking affect whales and dolphins in the wild?
Yes, you mentioned earlier about the strandings, and we had a stranding. I'm across the pond, I'm in the United Kingdom, and we had a stranding just a few weeks ago in the far north of Scotland of pilot whales came ashore, and sadly they all perished. And we're investigating the causes for that now, but we believe that there may have been some disturbance in the marine environment prior to them coming ashore. So obviously, the oceans these days now are incredibly noisy compared how they were 100 years ago, for example. And these are very sensitive acoustic creatures. And that's obviously going to have an effect as to how they live their lives, where they feed, the navigation, the critical habitat that is so important to them, where they go to socialize, to mate, to breed, and also to rest. So the oceans, sadly, are not as quiet as they used to be, unfortunately.
So which countries are making a stand against this industry? You mentioned, North America, there's legislation here in Canada and in Europe.
Canada, that's correct. And in France as well, by the year 2026, I'm not too far ahead. They just have 2 marine facilities now in France keeping whales and dolphins in captivity. But there is work underway now because legislation has come in a couple of years ago that within the next couple of years, captivity will be banned. In the United Kingdom, where I'm based, we haven't had a captive whale or dolphin facility for over 30 years now, but it's not illegal. What happened 30 years ago is the government of the day implemented very strict welfare guidelines, and the parks that were currently existing in the UK, they couldn't afford to implement these guidelines. So the remaining dolphins were shipped to the continent in Europe, and the final park closed in 1993. However, that means that if somebody had deep enough pockets and the intent, and they adhered to welfare guidelines that were set over 30 years ago, there's nothing stopping somebody opening a dolphinarium in the UK today. But having said that, I honestly believe, I don't think there's the public desire or the political will for that ever happened again. And a big part of the work that I do is just trying to get some simple legislation in place now with the UK government to finally outlaw this activity. So we'll never host a marine park holding whales and dolphins in the UK again.
Yes. And can you talk about the influence of tour operators?
Yeah, so that's been, again, another huge part of the work that I do, and we've had some great success over the years in persuading tour operators to stop promotion and selling tickets to these parks, especially in Florida, for example, across the pond, and lots of European resorts. So we started with Sir Richard Branson and Virgin Holidays, and they committed to ending all their association with these marine parks. And in the intervening years, we've had great success with travel companies like Expedia, Booking.com, Airbnb, TripAdvisor have all come out with really positive animal welfare policies to say that they will no longer be supporting any facility that keeps these sentient creatures in tanks. Having said that, our battle continues. The largest travel tour leisure company on the planet today is a company called TUI, based in Germany. And they still continue to sell tickets to these facilities. So we're working with other NGOs, and recently we had an event in Berlin, which is the headquarters of TUI in Germany, where we delivered 350,000 signatures from various supporter initiatives calling on this company to end their support for these parks. And also with the cruise ship industry as well, Carnival Cruises, they continue to sell these tickets, often discounted. That's the lure for their passengers. And especially in the Caribbean and Latin America areas, there are nearly 70 dolphin swim with facilities where people can jump off the ship and go and swim with a dolphin for $150, $200. But we are campaigning heavily now to work with the cruise ship companies to try to end this promotion as well.
That's something a lot of people don't think about because they understand the idea of animals in captivity in a marine park, but they somehow have this idea that conditions are really good for animals that are swimming with them. Can you talk about that? Can you talk about that aspect of the tourist industry where these dolphins are kept and how?
Yes, of course. The desire for the cruise companies to come in to these various ports in the Caribbean and Latin America. Lots of these dolphin parks don't even have car parks because they are totally reliant on the thousands of passengers which will come off a cruise ship. And some of these sea pens are quite often in polluted marinas, in the harbour, in the port where the cruise ship has moored alongside. And people who've been on these cruise ships will know that they have a limited amount of time on shore, so they have to be in very close proximity to the ship. So they will, the passengers will typically jump off and then walk across the marina. They'll find maybe a facility that has maybe 6 or a dozen dolphins in very small, cramped conditions in a sea pen, often, like I say, polluted. And, they'll have their experience for a few $100s and then back on the ship and then away to the next destination.
I'd love for you to talk about the misconceptions that people have about dolphins, because I think that a lot of people, they see the smile, which is anatomically there all the time, that a dolphin has, right? And they
exactly.
And they see them eating hungrily from the hands of tourists and think, oh, I want to do that. These dolphins are happy. They're enjoying themselves. So all of these, like both tricks and also, feeding of animals, it's all based on depriving them fish and being their own.
Exactly. The fish is a reward for them, behaving with the tourists. We have, and in some facilities, we've shown that the dolphins have been drugged with a tranquilizer just to reduce their stress levels. And you're correct, the smile of the dolphin is an anatomical quirk. Sadly, even a dead dolphin will still be smiling, so please don't be fooled by that. They primarily, the dolphin swim facilities, they'll be maybe starting 9 o'clock in the morning, they'll go through till sometimes 9 o'clock at night. And think about, over the course of the season, how many hundreds and hundreds of people that these dolphins will have to interact with. They have no choice over it. They have to do it. And for the tourist, it's maybe a bucket list experience for them for a couple of hours. But just, think of the dolphin day in, day out, week in, week out, having to repeat these same behaviors purely for the profit of the marine park that's hosting them.
Do you want to talk about the Iceland's hunting industry or just hunting in general? Do you have anything that you'd like to share about that?
Well, with Iceland, we believe that that's an industry that's coming to an end. Sadly, there's just one company or one individual, a very wealthy individual in Iceland, who has the whaling operation there. There's very little appetite amongst Icelanders, for example, in eating whale meat. And sadly, a lot of the whale meat that's sold in Iceland is sold for tourists. But there's that when in Rome mentality, if you like. But I firmly believe in the next couple of years, there's been lots of high-profile sort of political stances against Iceland whaling, and I really believe in the next couple of years that will die out. Whaling still goes on in a neighbouring country, Scandinavian country, in Norway, and of course in Japan as well. But we are trying to work within these countries. We promote sustainable and responsible whale watching, for example. Whale watching in Iceland is far more profitable. If we're talking about the economic value of whales and dolphins, it's far more profitable to invest in responsible whale watching, where individuals, they will be around if they left unharmed. They will be around for decades and decades, where they can bring joy to tourists who want to go out and experience these incredible creatures in the wild, as they should be, swimming wild and free.
I would love for you to talk a little bit about the capture of these dolphins and whales. I don't think a lot of people know that dolphins are very inhumanely captured.
That's right. There was a very famous documentary which won the Oscar called The Cove, and that highlighted what goes on in a place called Taiji in Japan. So the season is going to be starting again, sadly, on the 1st of September. And that's where they have drive hunts. So local fishers will go out and they'll round up whatever species of dolphin they come across, whether it's pilot whales or bottlenose dolphins, and they'll drive them into this cove where the younger individuals are taken into captivity and the older ones are quite often used for meat. So that's where a lot of the Chinese marine parks are getting their dolphins from. The scale of the industry, 1 in 3 of every captive whale and dolphin in the world today is held in China, just in one country. And China has 88 marine parks. As a comparison, I think the US has about 28 facilities at the moment. China has 88 with another 10 under construction. And up until a few years ago, if they were looking for the more charismatic species, if you like, orcas and belugas, the white whales, they went to the far east of Russia, where they were captured from the wild. We hope that we've put an end to those wild captures for the time being, but Russia being Russia, you never know for sure. But just the scale, like I said, there's about 1,300 whales and dolphins in tanks in China at the moment, and that represents about 14 or 15 species. So that's very much where we are working on the ground. We are part of a coalition called the China Cetacean Alliance, just working to highlight the welfare abuses in China. And also, ultimately, our aim is to influence policy with the Chinese government to bring an end to this practice.
Can you tell us about the sanctuaries for ex-captive individuals?
Absolutely. So I think with captivity, it's a failed experiment for the last 50, 60 years. Even the marine parks will talk about whales and dolphins getting restaurant quality food, the best veterinary care in the world, and clean water to swim in. They say all that, and yet a captive orca, for example, most captive orcas die in their late teens or early 20s. We know of individual wild orcas today that live in well into their 60s, 70s, some of the females even into their 80s. We know what the problem with captivity has been, but now sanctuaries offer us a solution. And I'm very proud of the fact that the organization I work for, Whale and Dolphin Conservation, we were founding partners in developing the first whale sanctuary on the planet today. It's the Beluga Sanctuary, where we rescued 2 belugas called Little White and Little Grey. They were performing for tourists at a marine park in Shanghai. And in 2019, we flew them to Iceland, where we developed, it's a place called Klettsvik Bay. There's a little group of islands off the south coast of Iceland. And we developed a sanctuary site for them, which is over 10 times the size of the pool that they left in Shanghai. It's in the North Atlantic Ocean. So for the first time since they were captured as babies in Russia, they will feel, the rain on their backs, the currents and the tides. And we hope the sanctuary site in Iceland, we currently have 2 belugas there, but we hope to welcome maybe another 10 or so belugas, because we know that there are other marine parks around the world who want to get out of the business now. So hopefully Little White and Little Grey as pioneers will be joined soon with other ex-captive belugas. Over in Canada, there's another sanctuary called the Whale Sanctuary Project, and I'm sure very soon that's close to completion now, and they'll be welcoming possibly belugas to Canada in the coming months and years, and also bottlenose dolphin sanctuary in a couple in the Mediterranean Sea, and also the Baltimore Aquarium. In the States, they made a decision that they no longer wanted to display their bottlenose dolphins, and they're looking to develop a sanctuary in the Caribbean, which will come online, I believe, in the next year or so. So lots of exciting sanctuary projects. It's not going to be the answer for 3,500 whales and dolphins in captivity, and not all captive whales and dolphins, especially if they've been born in captivity, will be suitable for release, for example. But the sanctuaries will allow them to live the rest of their lives in a retirement project, if you like, to as natural an environment as we can possibly create, though a lot of them will obviously still need to be under human care.
That's wonderful. I did see a documentary about a marine park in Canada that's near Niagara Falls, and they have been under extreme pressure to, shut down their operations. And I think now they're down to just one whale, and it's alone, and so just in situations where there's very few animals being kept or only a single animal being kept, it seems like, these sanctuaries provide a wonderful alternative as these companies transition away from.
Absolutely. And it's not going to be a revolution. Unfortunately, it'll be an evolution. And what marine parks that currently display whales and dolphins, what they can do to play their part is to, obviously, they'll have a responsibility to the individuals in their care, but let's end the shows. Let's end the breeding, because obviously breeding perpetuates the industry. Let's stop the transfers between parks, because a lot of that goes on sometimes seasonally. There's trade between various parks in Europe, for example. And let's call on the tour operators, which I mentioned earlier, to play their support, because they've made a lot of money, a lot of profit over the years from selling tickets to these parks. And let the tour operators start to play their part in helping us to develop the sanctuary model.
How did you get involved with whales and dolphins and porpoises? How did you first come to connect with them and be interested in their plight?
Well, I'm very fortunate living in an island nation, and I can remember going back to maybe when I was 4 or 5 years of age, going to the west coast of the UK and standing on a harbour wall. And probably at that age, I thought the ocean was probably quite cold and dark. And I can remember seeing a bottlenose dolphin breach completely out of the water, no more than maybe 10 feet away from me. And I think I was probably transfixed from that moment. And I've been fortunate enough to have some incredible experiences with whales and dolphins over the years, and to do the job I do today, which I've been doing for over 20 years.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Rob Lott, for joining us today on Healing Wisdom. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
You've been listening to Healing Wisdom at Outermost Radio. All of our shows are podcasts at WOMR.org. Also check out healingwisdomradioshow.com and contact me at pandora@WOMR.org. Our theme music is provided by Mason. You can find her website at masonmusic.com. That's MAESYN.